Right guys, welcome back to the channel. First off, make sure you hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified on my future content. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Why are these things important? Because the more you do that, the more that helps me out in the algorithm and the more people can see this. There is an uncensored version of this podcast with an extra R added. The reason why I've had to do it that way is because in that R there's too many things, too many truths that me and Joe speak about. So if you want to hear that uncensored version, then jump over to my Rumble, use the link in the description, head over, subscribe to my Rumble channel, give the video a rumble, leave a comment. It's just like YouTube, except it's completely uncensored and it's all free, and watch the uncensored version with the added R. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. If you do those things, that will be helping me out a lot. Remember, leave a comment, smash the like button, subscribe and ring the bell here. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. And if you want to follow me on social media, all the links for all my social medias can be found in the description of this video. If you want to get a hold of me, use my Instagram or my GETTR. And once again, guys, the uncensored version is on Rumble with an extra R. I've had to censor this one a lot, but if you want to hear the one completely uncensored, use the link in the description to head over to my Rumble and watch it there. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. I appreciate every single one of yous, and peace.
Joe Ward, it's an absolute pleasure to get you on, sir. How are you keeping?
My friend Ronan, thank you so much for having me, here today. It's really great to be here with you.
Joe, I've heard your story. I've seen your story on Facebook, and it's a mind-blowing story. When listening to your story, Joe, it seems surreal, but it is very real for you. Do you want to brief the audience on who you are, where you come from, and the sort of your early life and the start of your story?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'd like to say a thank you to you for having me on, because I do understand that with this subject obviously comes a lot of controversy and a lot of outside attention, and I have been somebody in the past who maybe somebody or some of the listeners listening to this might have be thinking is somebody with quite extreme opinions. But the reason that I am speaking out and doing these interviews and these podcasts now is to try and effectively show people, what is going on in the world, and hopefully help us understand a bit more about the sheer amount of child abuse that is happening in this world. This started for me growing up. I was very lucky to grow up in the entertainment industry. My father was a traveling musician, session musician, and then went on to be a record producer as well. So I had a great upbringing. But unfortunately, at the age of 11 years old, I suffered a rare form of child abuse called SRA that was perpetrated by a close family friend. This man, I've since learned, has connections to a satanic cult that was found trading child. And so, I've obviously had this experience as a child and kind of gone through my life. I was very lucky to be pulled out of this experience at 14 years old by the entertainment industry. But then I was plunged into a position within that industry where all of a sudden at 15 years old, I had a record company micromanaging every part of my life, trying to, trying to sort of almost turn me into something that I wasn't. I suffered a mental health effectively breakdown at the age of 23 years old, and decided that I was turning my back on music and all of that stuff that I'd grown up with, and I started working with victims of domestic violence, social services, in an attempt to really understand what had happened to me as a child. And as this unfolds, one of the things that I hope that the listeners will take away is that with SRA, with a lot of victims, it comes to a place where you all of a sudden, like, little pieces come together and it makes up like a puzzle in your mind. For a lot of us, obviously, when this happens to you as a child, you don't understand, you know, the different things that are happening to you and the different aspects of it. But as I was getting more and more involved in missing children's cases, murder cases, I started to make connections between the things that had happened to me as a child and the way that the world in general was working. And you know, the people, whether it be the people in charge, whether it be money, whether it be the entertainment industry, where obviously I'd had, you know, a certain amount of experience by that point. And this all led effectively to a spearhead at the 2009 pandemic, where people were beginning to follow my alternative history podcast, because I think I was one of the few people who was linking what was happening to our children, and one of the few people that wasn't afraid to just jump in the deep end and say, I don't think that this is simply a issue of whether you believe one thing or you believe another. I think that this runs fundamentally into the way that this world works and how it's going to affect future generations. And I continue to speak out. Last October, on my 31st birthday, after interviewing over 1,000 survivors of different forms of abuse, I finally took the step to decide to put my story out there, which obviously was a big step to take. But I felt like I was saying to survivors that the biggest tool of the abuser is silence, whilst I was still scared to speak out myself. So I took it upon myself, as I said, to tell my story. And if your listeners want to hear that story in full, they can do that at facebook.com/speaking out to heal, and also Enzyme Media on BitChute. But yeah, and that's how I got to where I am today. You know, I guess somewhere between an activist and an advocate. But yeah, what I hope to do today, and thank you so much for allowing me to do on your platform, is help people understand that the definition of a sex abuser or a sex offender that we've been given is so important that we change that in order to stop more children being abused. And if one person can listen to this podcast today and can go, you know, and it helps them, then I'm happy to do this, you know, all day
Yeah,
long. So
Joe,
thank you so much.
all the links for Joe's story can be found in the description of this video. So I urge people to use those links, go over, follow the page, like the page, and go and watch and listen to Joe's story. But Joe, I want you to sort of brief people on your story. You don't have to say the full thing. If people want to go and watch that, they can on Facebook. But just brief people from that early age. What happened to you? Briefly, what happened to you? How did this start?
So when I was 11 years old, I was introduced to a close family friend who hadn't been around for a while. He was good friends with my parents before I was born and came back into their lives when I was 11 years old. This person effectively groomed me and groomed a friend of mine, and would go on to ritually abuse the both of us. Now, what's different about our story, probably important for the listeners to know, that's different about our story, is there are kind of two ways that people get into SRA. There is the generational family side of things, where it has happened through the satanic cults, and the grandfather was an abuser, the great grandfather was an abuser, and they come down through these bloodlines and they preserve them carefully, and those children go on to be elite abused. And then there's the other side, which we were part of, where a lot of the black market runs from the child, these kinds of things. And we effectively, the two of us, were abused for the purposes of making and distributing child. This was done via what could be, I guess, classed as rituals, in that the upside down crosses, the seances, the blood drinking, making us watch horrendous of children being other horrible, things that, not leaving much to the imagination. And this effectively, as I said, went on until I was very luckily signed at the age of 14 years old to a record deal, which gave me an escape from that. But I, the scary thing about it was, all the way along this, I felt like, now, having worked with victims of abuse, I felt like my actions at the time as a child was screaming out that something was happening to me. But as you know, Ronan, from your research, it's very difficult for people to see these signs if they don't know the signs of sexual abuse. Yeah, and so we effectively were abused. I would go on to report this to the police at the age of 16 years old, and basically was told, because here in the UK we run on a system where that if somebody is not going to be part of a court case, then any evidence in relation to that person can't be used. Now, obviously, we're here talking about a satanic cult of people who swear allegiance to each other. No one's going to talk there. And we're talking about abused children, some of whom were not ready, and probably, like myself, for a long time didn't even understand what had happened to them. So by the time we got to my court case, basically there was hardly any evidence presented at all, and we got a not guilty verdict, which for a long time, as I said, it destroyed me and turned me into a not very nice person. I hit self-destruct mode: drugs, alcohol, bad mental health, women, just treating people like dirt, all the things that nowadays, I guess, with the way that we've improved, I mean, mental health still has a long way to go, but in the way that we've improved in mental health, I think, one of the sad cases of my story is that I think that I kind of suffered that mental health crisis just before everybody kind of realized that, oh, we need to sit up and take notice. I was very, very lucky in, as I said, that I didn't come from one of these generational families, and that I did have a supportive family around me. And when I told my parents what had happened to me, they were amazingly supportive. I think that they both have obviously said to me since that they wish that they had known the signs, and that's part of why I'm here speaking out as well, so parents can understand how many different ways that the things that their children are seeing, doing, and being influenced by do influence their actions. But yeah, so I guess you could say at 23, I was at a point where a very close friend of mine effectively saved my life. I was ready to end my life. And after that experience, I realized, it was sink or swim time. It was time to, either let my demons take hold of me fully, or to find grief, to find purpose in my grief. And that's what I effectively tried to do. There was a long time where I felt so much resentment towards the other survivors for not speaking out, for me when the time had come, but you learn and you grow, and once you become a survivor and you realize that this is something that, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, it eats away at you, and there is no such thing, unfortunately, as a perfect survivor. This is why we see so many survivors go down the route, as I did, of drink, of drugs, of bad mental health. And as I said, all of these things, culminated in where I am today. I also truly believe that having my daughter, I think that being able to recover from people with mental health will know you're never able to fully recover, but being able to get myself to a position where I was comfortable with the fact that I was never going to get real justice for what had happened to me because of circumstances that we'll sort of come on to. I realized that, I would find, as I said, a reason to go on, and the survivors and being able to help people gave me that. But I truly believe that then having my daughter, almost gave me a reason then to live, a reason to want to live and to be happy, and that's where I am today, really, Ronan. In a place where I think that I've spoken out on different issues, and there may be listeners watching this who have heard or seen things that maybe they disagree with that I've said or done. But now I think the most important issue moving forward is understanding that child abuse is not just this lonely people, because that's very much the way that it was portrayed in my story. A lonely, that a paedophile is just a lonely person who sits alone in his mum's basement, and this person couldn't possibly be like that. When, having now worked with over 1,000 victims myself, I can safely tell you that I can safely say to you that over 80% of them have different connections with, whether it be other paedophiles, they've been abused by more than one paedophile, there's pornography involved, all of these different things that lead me to question why, we're not being told that these paedophiles work in networks. And maybe if this had been easier or better understood, maybe myself and other children may have got more justice. But we'll never know. And as I said, I feel like I've had my daughter now. Anybody who has children, as you probably know yourself, it makes you care instantly and hypersensitive to issues that maybe that you weren't, previously. And so now I'm here, not through a choice of my own, truth be told. My love was alternative history, and that was what the podcast was always meant to be. But you can't pick and choose, and I truly believe that fate puts you where you need to be, and it's put me in this position where I'm speaking out. And thankfully, even though it's only small, little by little, people are starting to listen to us victims, and people like you, thankfully, are starting to question why this is happening.
Joe, I've got a question for you. If people need evidence or proof, there's one thing that stood out to me when I was listening to your story on Facebook, and it was everything up to the point to the court case was just you saying things. And as we know, we can't take what everybody says as the truth. But when it came to the court case, there are very literal things, and people need to understand this, that they diluted your story so much when it actually got to court. When people listened to the story, the jury, the judge, the people, everybody that was there heard such a diluted story that it wasn't even a molecule of what happened to you. So in my personal opinion, what you're dealing with there is you're dealing with possible elitism. So, let's break down what elitism is. It's just a collection of people that are very rich that come together to sort of plan the future for themselves. That's the definition of an elitist. So these people, the judge, no, I'm not saying the judge, but I'm saying the cops in the background, who do hold a very Masonic, there's a Masonic element to these people. And what do I mean by that? I'm not just saying all Freemasons are bad, because they're not, but I'm saying that there's a lot of these people in the police force that are, they won't rat on each other, they won't tell on each other, they will sort of do backhanders favors for each other. So to me, your court case is very, very interesting, because whenever I heard what they done, and you provided proof for that, because your story is linked up now with, you've been very consistent with your story, and that's one thing that people need to understand, your consistency with your story. But that court case is crucial, because it was the police, it was the CPS, it was the court system essentially that diluted your story, so then they would, the defendants would then get a not guilty. But if the full information had came out, it would have been guilty. So that, in my opinion, is a crucial part of your story, the court case in itself. And that's where the corruption, the elitism, the hierarchies that maybe are involved in this SRA themselves have used their powers to sort of suppress your story, dilute your story, so then it won't be heard properly, and then nobody gets convicted and sent to prison. How many people do you think, as you say, you've worked with 1,000 people there, and maybe more, how many people have went through similar things? Is this a rare thing, or is there an abundance? How many people are we dealing with here, Joe?
So I would take you back to the 1980s for what the media liked to call the Satanic Panic, where worldwide they had over 12,000 complaints to various law enforcements around the world of children being satanically ritually abused by a group network of elite people. And this sparked actually something called the Rains List, which it might be something for your listeners to look into. Now, the Rains List was actually commissioned here in the UK in the year 1994 by a doctor called Dr. Joan Coleman. And she had worked with hundreds and hundreds of victims of different psychological disorders who had been claimed, who the establishment effectively had claimed to have mental disorders, but it turned out they were suffering trauma from what they claimed to be this elitist group. And so when we look at that list that was released of the people that were accused, it was over 200 people, and I believe more names have even been added to that since. We're talking about five former high up members of British Parliament, including chancellors, including former Home Secretaries, including one former Prime Minister, celebrities, everywhere from the lower level of the police all the way to the highest level of what we would consider people with the most amount of worth in our society. And this Rains List was, it sort of is like one of those things that it's like the elephant in the room, really, because when we're talking about SRA, it's one of the few things that people can't ever come up with an alternative for. This happened, these people were accused, and even if every single person on that list was, not guilty of those, of those crimes, why were so many people high up in authority, kind of connected with this as well, connected with it? So I like to say how many coincidences make up a lie. And it's a very structured system, and it sort of starts on that kind of bottom pyramid. If you can kind of imagine a pyramid, and at the bottom of it you've got your healthcare professionals, you've got teachers, you've got social care workers, you've got civil servants, the faces of the public that are kind of the people that, you know, we trust with our children. But then we look more closely into those organizations, the people that are working with just general people like me and you. And we look at social services, for instance. Social services should surely be working on a scheme where we're looking for bad people, we're looking to effectively help people, and in the best case scenarios, reunite children with their families, if that is possible to do. Obviously, I understand, having worked in it, that that's not always possible to do. So why are we finding out instead that each child is worth £30,000 that's taken away from a family by social services? Why is it being run on an incentive-based scheme? I'd ask you to look into schools, and again, we can talk about the rights, the wrongs of wokeness, but to me it doesn't matter. What I'm looking at is that we're suffering the biggest mental health crisis amongst young people in the history of the world. We're talking before people had light, before people had electricity, before they could warm their homes. Children now are unhappier than they were 100 years ago. And you have to ask yourself, again, why? And all of this stuff feeds into this system. And this is how these children end up, as I said, within being able to be in a position where they're so broken down mentally that it's easy for the abusers to target our children. I would also look at healthcare. Again, it's a subject that many people don't want to talk about, but we look at the fact that in the year 1980, 1 in 10,000 children suffered from autism, ADHD, other issues to do with behavioral issues. We look at now, it's 1 in 50. And we look at those statistics and we go, even if you don't believe what we're saying here today about the SRA, I think people have to start to get their head around that this is an assault on their children just from a lower level. And a lot of these children do end up, whether it be through social services, whether it be we've had many victims come to us, obviously, who ended up in SRA through the care system because they're easy targets. We've also had victims come to us through the healthcare system. One that really stayed with me was the story of Jane Taylor, a girl who effectively ended up in SRA because she through medical experimentation, and because she was put into care at a young age because of her disabilities, it effectively gave these people the right to do whatever they wanted to her scientifically. And so SRA is not just about abuse, it's also about a psychological form of trauma that stays with a child that will either send them into a position where they end up back in the cult, or they end up off the rails that nobody is going to believe them when they come with their story. And I've said it before, Ronan, but if you just listen to my story on its own, it does sound like a crazy tale. But when you line up 1 victim of SRA, 2 victims of SRA, 3 victims of SRA, it creates for you a picture that will have to leave you in your mind questioning why. You go up through that system past the faces of the public, and you've got the politicians and the celebrities, the puppets, what I like to the faces of the elite, not the real elite, but the faces of the elite. And again, I went back to when I talked about the satanic the Reigns list of satanic abusers earlier, celebrities and politicians being on this list. Well, people are sat at home, watching ITV and watching the BBC every day, watching these people, generally thinking that these people make the decisions, and that these people are in charge. And effectively, when you become a victim of abuse, you start to see through things like that, because you realize, you realize these people who are easily blackmailable, and also having worked with as I said, victims of trafficking, all the way through to victims of this SRA. There are so many people, accusing politicians, celebrities. Why do we only hear about the odd one here and there? Well, it's because a lot of the time within this entertainment industry, whether it be drugs, affairs, prostitutes, children, whatever it is, they find the vices of these people. Politicians and celebrities are not there by chance. I'm sorry to burst that bubble for you. I was signed to a record deal at the age of 14 years old, and I can tell you for a fact, nothing you see on television is ever as it seems. And there is a reason. Have you ever sort of sat back maybe and thought to yourself, God, like, I'm a really good singer, or I'm as good a guitar player as that guy. I'm as good a singer as that guy. I can act as well as that guy. Why aren't I the one on TV? It's all because of the game. They are looking for these personality types that they can control. And these are the people who make it to these positions of politicians, of celebrities, of faces of the media, the people that can easily be controlled. So when somebody like myself, or Jeanette, or Rachel Vaughan, or Fiona Barnett, or any of these people speak out, we can be rubbished, because even going back down to the faces of the public, as I said, at the bottom of the pyramid, where you're talking police officers, you've got 1 in 3 police officers here in the UK are now a Freemason. So not only do they, even if we want to take out the goods, the bads, and the uglies of Freemasonry, and just talk about the oath that they have to take to protect one another, now all of a sudden, you've not just got one police oath to protect one another. You've now got a double oath of the fact that this person is effectively supposed to be treated like your brother. So, at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got these kind of these faces of the public that feed the children into this system. With the politicians and the celebrities, a lot of the children end up there because they're easy bait for the politicians, and they get used as blackmail. Imagine being Boris Johnson, or or Donald Trump, or whoever, because they're all puppets. Imagine being in that position where you want to do something, and then all of a sudden they go, the people that are pulling the strings behind, who we're going to talk about in a minute, they say to you, absolutely not, mate. We've got this on you. We've got that on you. You're not going to do it. No, nobody will.
Well, I've got one for in particular from my area, Joe. It's a councillor called William Walker, and he's a member of the DUP, which would be considered loyalists, not loyalists, but unionists. It's a unionist party, right? I'd be a nationalist, and we all know nationalism is connected to Catholicism, Catholic, the Catholic religion, and we all know about the Catholic Church and the cover-ups. And I'm not taking that away, by the way. And I'm not just picking out one because I'm from one side. But just local to me, that guy William Walker, he was stung by a paedophile hunting group, and he was very big, high up in the DUP over here. And he also, his job, I think, I'm not 100% sure, I think, no, I'm fairly sure, was working with kids in schools. And he was stung by a paedophile hunting group in England, and they passed over the information to the police, I think, over here, and then the arrest happened. Now, this is what we're dealing with. You're correct in what you say, that there is, for instance, let's talk about the Masonic element to this. Not all Freemasons are bad, of course, 100%. Yes, it's a gentleman's club. But if you take an oath to say, I am going to protect my brother who's also a Freemason. Well, now, if that brother is a police officer and you're a doctor, that's a massive conflict of interest, because if you're a doctor and you find out that, just say that person's child comes in with suspect bruises or whatever, or is telling the story, or even if it's a social worker that's in the Freemasons, that is a conflict of interest, because they have to protect one another. And I think that's where the conspiracies lie with this. It's not just the Masonic element. There is other types of groups that are like this, other groups that sort of protect each other. But the Freemason one, the Masonic one, is one of the oldest ones, and it's deep rooted into the police system. It's deep rooted into the foster homes. I recently spoke to a guy, Alex Kearney, who is a paedophile hunter, and he's a great man. He's a great guy. He's ex-Royal Marine, and he was quite outspoken about the foster homes about Bernardo's and things like that, and he says, look, this is what they are. These foundations are founded, and their baseline is satanic. Well, not he didn't say satanic. I'm saying satanic looking into it, but he says they're deep rooted in pedophilia and the kids. And what people need to understand is, and I don't mean to talk on, I'm just saying what I know. People need to understand is a lot of people will be listening to this going, well, you know, my kid didn't go through this. Well, your kid maybe wasn't, you know, not all kids will go through this, but it's the kids that are vulnerable. It's the parents that think, well, it's not never going to be my child. Well, it will be your child if you allow this, especially in this day and age with technology, apps, things like that. We're seeing that across the board with predators clicking onto that, and that's the lower pyramid. But what Joe's talking about here is the higher ups, not even the tip of the pyramid, the middle of the pyramid. The tip of the pyramid controls all. You know, that's when you get into the David Icke's and stuff like that, the top of the pyramid. But for the people at the bottom of the pyramid like me, who didn't realize this and are awake to this now, it does seem like there is a mass attack on the consciousness of children. That's the only way I can put it. And it's not just about the sexual abuse. It's actually about extracting the consciousness of children and warping that consciousness. And you're seeing that with symbolism with Disney. You're seeing that with symbolism all over. I just recently seen a thing, Joe. I don't know if you've seen it. If I'll find the link and I'll put it in the description, where it was a magician and he was able to, make a long story short, he was able to make 300 people in the crowd write down the same thing on paper, and they didn't even know what they were writing, and it was a star. So if one person can do that to 300 people, and that's done through suggestiveness, and that's done through sort of subliminal suggestiveness, then what is the TV? What is YouTube? What is going on? What is our children being suggested to do without us knowing? And we're seeing that now. There's a lot of that coming. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's real. It's happening. This does happen to kids, and it's just a good thing that there's platforms like Rumble that I can put this uncensored on to hear your story completely uncensored. And that's just my 2 cents in it. I just had to say that, but listening to what you had to say. But
no, it's interesting because I was just wanted to write a few things down. I was just writing a few bits down there that you said, because you massively hit the nail on the head, because that was the next thing I was going to say. You know, obviously you have these faces of the public, you know, then you have these celebrities and politicians, and then at the top, you know, you have these sort of the true elites, the true people that run the world, and the people don't really, you know, a lot of people don't really understand that. We can come back to that, but just relating to it, you know, to what you were saying, you know, you have to ask yourself, you know, if I believe that the world is, you know, a completely 100% fair place in what that I think that it is, then why is the system built the way that it is to favor the the accused rather than the accuser? I mean, I like to think that here in the UK, and I mean, I'm a pretty well-traveled guy, truth be told, and I've never met one culture, you know, on this planet, or one race of people who think that pedophilia is a good thing. So why are the public not in absolute outrage? It's because there is this small elite at the top of the world that are covering everything. And at the end of the day, you know, Ronan, what is the best way to truly be in control is to run it from the back line, to make people think effectively that somebody else is running the show while you pull the strings in the background. I mean, the fact that people in this day and age still don't understand, you know, like Federal Reserve. I mean, the fact that going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but like, you know, historically, the fact that the Rothschilds funded both sides of World War One and World War Two, you know, it's things like the fact that when we say the UK or Ireland is in however much amount of debt, they never tell you who they're in debt to. They're in debt to the richest 1% who buy up that debt. And then the countries owe them favors. People say, why are China allowed to do these things? Why are China allowed to? Because it's all coming from the snake's head. It's all coming from the top of the system. And the way that it relates to the child abuse is, unfortunately, whether people want to, admit it or not. And it goes back to a bit to what you were saying earlier about, the satanic thing, sorry, the satanic thing, it doesn't really matter all that much whether you believe in God or the devil or or Jesus, or whether you're a Hindu or whether you're a Muslim or whether you're Jewish. These things, when it comes to child, it doesn't, it's not. Sorry, I've missed my point quickly, right?
No, I get what you're saying. So basically, it doesn't matter if you're an atheist, right? If you're an atheist, if you're an atheist, see it this way. It's a very bad thing being done to kids, and it is happening. If you're religious, it's a religious attack.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make a difference. It's happening regardless if you're religious or not. At the very least, these people believe in what they're doing, and they think that it's a negative energy, and they think that doing this to kids and warping the minds of kids is benefiting them, because essentially they wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't benefiting them. And that's a question I have for you, right? What is the purpose? What are they getting from this? I don't want to say it this way, but what is attracted? Why are they attracted to do this? Because me, as a normal person, I've got a son that's got autism. I couldn't imagine. I would rather throw myself off a bridge. I would rather drive away and never be seen again. What is the purpose? Why do they do this to kids, and what is the end goal?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, actually, and you completely made me remember my point, because that was it. These people, whether you believe in whatever you believe, these people, they believe in Satan. And we go back to things like Bohemian Grove is something for people to research if they haven't seen before, and the satanic parties that go on there with the elites and with Hollywood as well. Marina Abramovich, who is a spirit cooker, who is a lady who is literally entrenched in the society of what being a celebrity is, and has links with people all around the world, and is a self-professed Satanist. What probably the best way I could explain it, though, to you in terms of what their end purpose is. I interviewed a survivor called Robert. He was part of something that was called the Montauk Project, which effectively, to the public, was put out as a project that was supposed to be to do with, if you needed a heart transplant or a liver transplant, they would try to replicate the organs in animals. Now, Robert came to me as a survivor and basically said, that's not what the Montauk Project was about at all. The Montauk Project was an experiment on children, effectively. They were doing the things they were saying they were doing, but they weren't doing them on animals. They were doing them on us. And he introduced me to a group of other survivors who told me all similar stories about medical experimentation, where they were effectively, sent to the limit of what a human could withstand, whether that be for the purpose of going on. Some of them had served in the military, some of them had gone on to serve as politicians, some of them had obviously gone completely off the rails, and some committed suicide, telling me all of these different sort of stories. But one thing that really linked it is and that really stayed with me from meeting that group of Montauk survivors, was that they said, anything that you've seen in a movie, or that we've tried, that even science fiction, time travel, if you've thought about it or it's been in a movie, they have tried to do it. And I think that that is the end goal for these elites. They believe that through, some people aren't going to want to hear this, but is a massive factor as well. That for me, this isn't even really a conspiracy anymore. When we look at LA and the fact that under 16s are effectively being given vouchers for the cinema and vouchers for this and that to go and give blood, which is effectively being used by old people as skincare treatments. I mean, like, you know, this is out in the open now to me. But you know, I generally believe that the end goal is that they are trying to push the human boundaries. I mean, when we look at the most, I'm not going to name him for legal purposes, but the most recent Rothschild to have passed, when we look at him and we look at the fact that he had 4 heart transfusions, you know, the fact that this guy you know, was not particularly a healthy guy and managed to live to a ripe old age, you know, and the Rothschild family are a whole podcast on their own, so I really don't want to get too much into them. But like I said, it's something really, if you're kind of just on your way in, something to really look into. But I think that that is the aim. They want to create, or they may be near, or possibly, depending on who you speak to and what you believe. Because I mean, you've got people like Clyde Lewis over at Ground Zero in the US who believe that they've already conquered all of this stuff. A survivor that runs an SRA page with me, Jeanette Archer, she truly believes that they've conquered all of this stuff as well. So it's interesting conversations to have. But
is it eternal life? Eternal life, Joe. You're looking for eternal life
for these bloodline families who effectively are creating these cycles on their own children, to so effectively it never ends the cycle of SRA.
Yeah, it's eternal life. I think what they're trying to accomplish here, which I can't disagree with your friends there, that there is an element to this where they want to live forever, and the definition selling your soul to the devil shouldn't be taken lightly, because you know, anybody that takes the path, the enlightened path, whether you're an atheist or whether you're religious, it doesn't make a difference. You take the enlightened path to be good to kids, be good to people, be kind, and be sort of not sacrificial, but sacrifice yourself for other people's happiness. Just do that thing to make other people feel good. Where these people, they're sacrificing children, they're sacrificing the consciousness of children so that they can live forever. As you know, if people don't realize what that is, that's a heightened state of fear. The brain will produce a child's brain will produce a chemical, and then they extract that chemical, and that is essentially can make people live for longer. You know, that's the dumbed down version of it, but there's a lot more. There's a scientific version of that. I've said that's the stupid way, but essentially these people have clicked on to, you know, back in the 80s, back in the early 90s, talking about you know, blood and stuff. It was considered a conspiracy theory. Now it's actually mainstream, that we know now that this is actually used. This is a thing that these elites knew about for a very long time. They dubbed it a conspiracy theory, but it's actually fact now. They do these things. They do use young blood. They do have multiple heart transplants. And taking a heart transplant doesn't mean you're a bad person, but you have to understand these Rothschilds, these elites, these elitist families have used kids and have abused children to prolong their life, and they have sold their soul to the devil just for an extra couple of years on earth.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Joe, but I would rather be a clean, pure person and live to 30 than be an evil devil worshipper, Satanist, and live to 110. There's more to life than being, you know, wanting to live longer, if that makes sense.
100%, yeah. I mean, like in simplistic terms, yeah. No, I was going to say, like, just like you said, I mean, and just in the way that they use the black market, they use just the way they use the the normal market, sorry, they use the black market as well. Anybody who doesn't think that our governments and our politicians are involved in the black market only has to go and look at what happened in South America during the 70s and 80s and then the crack epidemic. And I mean, they use the black market as much as they use the above market. And the reason that you talked about selling your soul to the devil, and there's a reason that in the entertainment industry, when a band has massive success, they say, oh, they've sold their soul to the devil, they've sold out to the devil. There's a reason behind it, because it's because I've been in that position, and your life is not your own anymore. People don't understand how micro-managed these people are in terms of turning up to interviews. We did adverts some days, and I shit you not, Ronan, we turned up at some TV adverts sometimes, and we wouldn't know what the product was, anything about the company. It was just, this is your script, get out there, do it, bang, on to the next thing. And what really makes me, it's sad, but it makes me laugh in a way, is when people say, oh, that artist is really hard to deal with, they're a maverick, they're not. I'm sorry, if you were hard to deal with, I was hard to deal with. And if you were hard to deal with, you would not be in that position, because as I said, they're looking for these personalities. And it's not just because of SRA, it's because, as you rightly pointed out, it is an assault on children and on the population in general, because if they can get this level of cognitive dissonance where a parent is telling themselves, and again, I want to put a flag in the sand and say I have absolutely nothing against anybody living their life exactly the way that they want to do, but when we're seeing images of, in libraries here in the UK, of half-naked drag men with, all kind of mannerism of things out and sex toys in front of children, and one parent, stands up and says, oh, I don't think that this is right, and gets labeled a right-wing conspiracy theorist for it. I think that is something in itself that needs to make parents go, am I really on the right side of this, or am I just following the crowd and what everybody believes? Because if nothing else, Ronan, surely the last 3 years should show people that you can't trust the government, you can't trust the media. So if you can't trust them on every other issue when it comes to your life, how are you going to trust these people with your children? You can't. And how are you going to trust them to show you the correct information? I just don't believe that you can,
Right, guys, that is the end of the podcast. Now, there's an extra hour to this podcast. If you want to hear and see and watch the full podcast completely uncensored, head over to my Rumble. You can find the link in the description. Head over, leave a comment, subscribe to my Rumble. It's just like YouTube, it's all free. And give the video a rumble, that's just a like. And you can watch the full thing uncensored, free on my Rumble. Use the link in the description, guys. Do not miss that one. The reason why I can't upload the full thing to YouTube is because there's too many truths in the Rumble version. There's too many truths in the uncensored version. So head over to Rumble, make sure you do that, guys, and subscribe to my Rumble channel. I'm trying to kickstart that, and watch the full uncensored version. As I say, there's an extra hour to this podcast. I've censored the hour that's went on YouTube, but if you want to watch the next hour and the previous hour that you've just watched completely uncensored, use the link in the description. Head over and tell me what you think, and subscribe to my Rumble, guys. You will not be disappointed. If you haven't already, guys, and massive respect to the ones that have subscribed, they always like and they always comment. If you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell. You're doing me a favor. It helps me out in the algorithms, trying to grow this channel naturally. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to be notified on my future content. Smash the like button and leave a comment and tell me what you think. If you want to follow me on social media, all my social media links can be found in the description of this video. That's my Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, my GETTR and my Rumble. If you want to get a hold of me, use my Instagram or my GETTR. If you want to hear my uncensored opinions, use my GETTR. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Remember, head over to Rumble, watch the uncensored version with the extra R. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, guys, and peace.